really want to thank y'all for coming out tonight and supporting the literary arts in Lake Charles. Yeah, exactly. We're changing things a little bit this month. We invited 2 fiction writers to come and read for y'all. We have Stacy Lynn and Brendan Egan. They're both in their final semester as MFA candidates at McNeese State University. I want to remind y'all, if you do enjoy what you hear tonight, and if you enjoyed William Coppage and J. Bruce Fuller, I encourage y'all to go see them read again at the graduate reading. It's on May 21st at 7 p.m. at the Burton Coliseum, or not, what is it?
BBC.
Oh, BCC on McNeese campus. So should be awesome. We're going to go ahead and get things started with Stacy Lynn Austin. So help me in welcoming her.
Hello, how are you guys? All right, I've had 2 whiskeys, so those of you that know me, this could be interesting. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. I see a lot of my friends here, so I feel very lucky to have so many of you guys in my life. So if I have nothing else, I have that. All right, I'm going to read a news story for you guys. It's called Itch. It's fun, which seems to go good with Friday, so I hope you enjoy it, because if you don't, I'm really going to need another whiskey up here. All right, here we go. Itch. I itch, these half-dollar size patches of skin that I scratch until they turn red and bleed. For no reason, I think, at first. But then, of course, it occurs to me. My husband is having an affair with Jane, a colleague of his from Sun Advertising, where he has been a partner for nearly a decade now. You see, I've always been that way. When something causes me distress, I break out in a rash. At first, I spent weeks thinking about ways to win back his affections. I wouldn't confront him, of course. That could lead to some kind of action, like divorce, and the threat of that is too risky. You see, at first, I think I still love him. I think that because it's this very angry feeling that I have when I find out. My friend Marianne tells me. She's in Jane's spin class at the YMCA and overhears a conversation between Jane and another woman in the locker room. Jane has no idea who Marianne is, of course, so it wouldn't occur to her not to say Jeffrey this and Jeffrey that. Marianne said that she wouldn't have thought twice about it, but Jane had told her friend that her lover, this man Jeffrey, was married. Well, Marianne sees a business card on the tag of Jane's gym bag, and sure enough, it says Sun Advertising, and Marianne isn't my brightest friend, but she can put 2 and 2 together. Marianne finished this story and then said, I wasn't sure if I should tell you or not. I say, well, Marianne, this can't be, but I'm wrapping the phone cord around and around my hand, because really I'm thinking, well now, this makes a lot of sense. Not just because of the rash, I mean, but other things. You see, it's not the usual things. There are no late hours. My husband travels some for work, so I suppose they have that together, though I can't imagine they would flaunt it in that way. But there are signs. Like suddenly, my husband loves something called kumquats. They're these tiny little oranges that you eat, skin and all. He comes home with a bag of them every now and then. Well, when I discovered the affair, I find out where Jane lives from Marianne's YMCA member directory, and what do you know? The woman has a whole kumquat bush outside of her house. The whole thing, including the very existence of kumquats, is just so ridiculous. Where did I think he was getting this strange little fruit? Supermarkets don't sell them. I'd never thought to ask. Then, my husband, months ago, he started talking about getting a sleep number bed, and he said he really liked the idea of being able to control how firm or soft a bed was because it was so comfortable. Well, I asked, how do you know? He became a bit flustered and then said that he had tried one at the mall. This was right after I got back from a trip to San Antonio with Emily's Girl Scout troop. Well, I should have known then and there. He also started complaining about our cat, Pablo. He said, this cat's fur is everywhere and people at work are allergic. I said, well, what does our cat's fur have to do with people at work? and he said that the fur was always on his clothes. I said to use a lint roller. I said Emily loves that cat. I said we've had that cat for 8 years. And now, after the conversation with Marianne, imagine what I felt, suffering through the thought that this woman had been in my house, complaining about my cat. Was it really a wonder that I threw a whole vase full of petunias on the kitchen floor when I hung up the phone? Keep in mind, I had been through a whole tube of hydrocortisone cream at this point. I must say, I haven't always been the perfect wife, but I haven't been a bad wife either. Our lives, I guess you could say, were typical. We went to college and met through a mutual friend. Our wedding was all the usual things a wedding should be. My lipstick was too dark, we were young, and he had bad posture in most of our photos. But at the time, I had loved him very much. I remember thinking my life was so complete. At the time, I didn't even notice his horrific posture. I was happy with my position as Jeffrey's wife, happy with the life it afforded me, and so I wanted him to love me still, or perhaps rather, I did not want him to love Jane. I am familiar with Jane, have seen her at company Christmas parties and such. That woman has thighs the size of Georgia. My mother used to use that expression, and I can't really say Jane's thighs were what made her so awful, but it was something. You see, she wears glasses and has an irritating habit of running her tongue across first her top and then her bottom teeth. Plus, she is a snot, always dropping names of how she knows so-and-so. She's the kind of person who thinks she is good friends with everyone, but she probably spends most of her weekends in sweatpants. It isn't acceptable that he should have an affair with a woman like that he should choose a woman like that over me, especially when I have been so wonderful. Well, maybe not wonderful, but very much adequate. Do we share interests? No, but I have a precise way of ironing and folding his shirts, and I keep this household totally afloat. I may not work, but someone has to be here to care for the errands and things, and our home looks like a picture from Better Homes and Gardens magazine, and our maid Bernice only comes once a week, so you see, most of that can be accredited to me. Plus, I had his only child. Of course he wanted two, but I swelled up to the size of a house with the first pregnancy, and I told him he had another thing coming if he thought I would put my figure in such jeopardy again. Besides, Emily is a perfectly good child. She will be 10 years old this summer, and she is the spitting image of me. We considered adoption, but we didn't know how Emily would adjust to that. You see, she's not very used to having to share. But when I found out about this affair, I just went into a tizzy. First, I thought of all the things I could throw at him. I thought of saying, "Do you know what my most recent dermatology bill was?" But as I mentioned earlier, confrontation was very dangerous. It was around this time, too, that I came to a realization that I might not love my husband, per se, but I was very comfortable with him. Our relationship is like a perfectly ordered closet. I know exactly where everything is with him. Of course, this whole ordeal threw quite a wrench into things, but I firmly believe that my husband didn't love Jane. A wife can tell something like that. So instead, what did I do? Well, I went to the beauty salon and I had my hair dyed a most beautiful shade of red. Jane has red hair. I paid more attention to my husband. I said, "Honey, why don't we get that Sleep Number bed?" And that very weekend, we took Emily to the mall and placed our order. Of course, little Emily tried one and insisted that we order one for her too. It was so cute that I just couldn't say no, even though Jeffrey thought it was ridiculous. Jeffrey has always thought our child indulged and spoiled, and I suppose he blames me for that too. But where has he been all these days I've had to raise her? The child is a sharp negotiator and has been since the day she came into this world, kicking and screaming like being born was a total injustice. There has been little, I'm sure you'll agree, that I could have done about that. But anyway, I wanted to please Jeffrey, and I felt a kind of obligation to make peace between us. Perhaps I hadn't paid enough attention, I said to myself. That's probably why he ended up in Jane's high-tech bed. So, I found a recipe for kumquat salad online, and I'm not lying when I report to you that he said it was the best salad I had ever made. And all this time I was conducting research. It was because of Mary Ann that I was able to find out so much about Jane. Jane wanted children. Jane loved the theater. Jane volunteered at a summer camp for disabled children. Jane was up for promotion against a man named Steve with long nose hairs. Jane drove a red sports car. What was I going to do with any of this information? Well, I didn't simply write it down for the hell of it. If it was Jane he wanted, I would make sure it was Jane he got. So one afternoon he came home and I surprised him with tickets to the theater. And when he said, "But darling, you don't like the theater," I told him not to be ridiculous. I loved the theater, just loved the costumes and the dancing. My husband said there would be no dancing, but how was I to know that Lysistrata included no dancing and the dullest of costumes? Well, I loved it anyway. Yes, I loved it. Now, one thing you must know is that my husband and I have a very average sex life. Perhaps some may consider it below average, and I suppose I believed that the moment that sleep number bed arrived, he would feel aroused again. It seemed a simple answer to the baffling equation of how to make me want him again. So the day that blasted bed arrived, I dug out some old lingerie that I hadn't worn in years, and I'm not lying when I tell you it still fit like a glove. I've had a simple procedure since my pregnancy with Emily. I swear, sometimes when that child misbehaves, I want to scream, "You wreaked quite a havoc on my abdominal muscles, little miss. Now start acting like you were worth it." Now, of course, I work out as well as having had my little tuck. I used to just do Pilates on DVD, but now I join Mary Ann's spin class. It satisfies me, I must say, to study Jane and watch her squirm. Of course, I pretend as though I have no idea about any of it, and I make sure to act just as sweet as a button to her. I say to her, "Oh, Jane, my daughter is selling Girl Scout cookies. Would you like to buy any?" And what do you know? Perhaps out of guilt, she orders 5 boxes, and I would be lying if I said that I wasn't satisfied, thinking her thighs would be swelling in the very near future. But anyway, I was discussing sex on the sleep number bed. Being a lady, I won't go into details, but I will say my lingerie combined with the customized levels of firmness would probably lead to quite the romp. Of course, I wouldn't know, because I simply put on the lingerie and then lay on the bed eagerly waiting my husband's arrival in our bedroom. My husband's lack of interest was frankly embarrassing. He turned on the news. The news! Well, I had some news for him. I realized then that I should have learned something very important from my visit to the theater, and I started to develop my own specific plans. But before I could really meditate on what to do, I had to apply globs of fluenzicide to that dreadful skin rash. I had patches of mosquito-like bumps covering my elbows, upper arms, and inner thighs. The insult to injury is that I've always had the most perfect of skin. I wouldn't go around telling everyone this, but I was once Miss Georgia State. I angrily rubbed the medicine in. To think, I thought it would take a thing so simple as a salad and some old lingerie. Now, around this time, Mary Ann says there is a position open for a part-time secretary at her financial planning office. All they need is someone to man the front desk 15 hours a week. Now, I have no college education. I was attending Georgia State before I was married, but then Jeffrey earned his promotion, and before I could finish my degree, he had moved to Dallas. But Mary Ann says they only need someone to answer the phones, and let me assure you, that is well within my skill set. At the interview, I smile and say, I believe all women should establish a sense of independence. I read this just last month in Oprah magazine, and it seems to be just what they want to hear. After landing the job, I buy myself a Lord & Taylor career woman wardrobe that would take 5 months of income to pay off if I didn't have such a large sum of money that was left to me by my mother when she joined my father in eternal rest. But of course I do, and I'm glad because my mother certainly would have approved, maybe not of my working, but surely of these silk blouses. To be honest, I can never understand the glossy colored pie charts that come across my desk, or anything that I overhear in the meeting rooms, but I do enjoy my mornings at the office. I am only there from 9 to noon, but I do find adequate time to catch up on Martha Stewart living, and my husband seemed utterly baffled and somewhat impressed when I awoke early with him for my first day of work. And what do you know? It turns out that my husband's company handles all of the advertising for virtual financial planning, and he tells me that it's quite a large account. Yes, I do enjoy my job. The only downside is that it's simply very tiring, though I do feel a truer sense of purpose now. I'm better at this than I was at staying home with Emily. I used to drink gin during her nap times. In my defense, she was a very difficult child. Once, she pulled out a clump of my hair. Can you imagine? After all I had done for her? Though that was long ago now, but I don't think my years are showing. I must say, I use vitamin C extract on my face every night, and it's better than any wrinkle cream out on the market. I don't care what your Avon lady tells you. So that's what I tell my husband at night. Not that he seems even remotely interested in sleeping with me to begin with. I tell him that I'm just so tired, exhausted in fact, from work and tending to all of the family needs. I tell him this so that he will be assured I am the one not wanting to sleep with him. I tell him so that I can start to try and believe it, so that I can say to myself, I am the one in control, and I am not the one being hurt. Yesterday, his car smelled like her perfume. At Wednesday's spin class, I deliver Jane $21 worth of cookies. I show her Emily's most recent school picture and say, isn't she just a doll? She's so happy about these cookie sales. Our Emily is a very goal-oriented child. Jane seems to cringe at the use of the word "are," but even she must admit, my child is simply beautiful. It's not just my opinion. Once a talent scout approached us in a grocery store. It was quite the scene. Emily stuck out her tongue and stomped on his foot. She was only 7 at the time. How was she to know opportunity when it hobbled away from her? I love children, Jane tells me. Every summer, I volunteer at Camp Hope. Of course she does. Jane volunteers for many things, like keeping my husband company. What a charitable heart she has. That's what I tell her. You're such a kind person, I say. Oh, Jane says, a look of horror crossing her face. Your arms! I realize that in the light, the big red blotches of raised hives look even worse than they really are. Perhaps I'm allergic to this, Jane. Oh, it's nothing, I tell her, just a little rash. I have a new job, I tell her, at virtual financial planning. The new job is very stressful, and stress has always caused me to break out in rashes. I feel just as good as her in that moment. I have a job too. The company I work for sounds impressive. Maybe my husband has told her that I'm just a secretary, but I'm a very good secretary, and neither of them can take this away. How funny, Jane says. That's Steve's account. Oh yes, Steve. The one with the nose hairs, I ask her. Why yes, she tells me, giggling, as if we were teenagers or two close friends out to lunch. How did you know? My husband tells me, I say, flashing her a big white smile. He tells me everything about work. Is it just my imagination that for a moment she looks truly fearful? It makes me question what goes on between my husband and Jane while they're at the office. And somehow I thought it would make me feel better to say that, but now I only feel worse. She must know, of course, that he hasn't informed me, and I think it's the betrayal that feels the worst, because it means that the two of them have a secret, because it means that I am the cause of their alliance. I watch Jane walk away, her long red ponytail bouncing, and I press a paper towel over the bloody spots in my arm and hope that the scabs won't look too noticeable. My second week, I place a call to Sun Advertising and ask for Steve's boss. Then I rave about how we all think so highly of Steve here at Virtual Financial Planning. In fact, He is pivotal to our very relationship with the company. We adore the brochures, we are thrilled with the website, and we couldn't be happier with the local television ads. Everyone else at the office is out to lunch, so I can say this all loudly, convincingly, as if I am someone important. Funny he never asked me my role at the company. It's so easy to assume others are more impressive than they really are. When my husband asks me how things went at work, I tell him that work is fantastic. I say, "Darling, do you like this baked chicken? Do you know I spent all day marinating this baked chicken?" "This baked chicken is wonderful, honey," he says. I wish the man would spend all day doing something to me, but he seems completely preoccupied. What that woman has on my baked chicken, I cannot imagine, but I feel an itch just under my chin, and to my horror, the bathroom mirror reveals a fresh red circle of tiny bleeding bumps, and so near my face. I simply can't finish my baked chicken. I tell my husband, won't he make sure Emily gets to bed? I leave another message for the dermatologist. What business he has taking a week-long vacation, I do not know. I leave a message for Marianne. I take an Ambien and wear gloves to bed. I can feel that itch even in my sleep, and if I don't keep something over my nails, I know that even when I'm dreaming, I'll be scratching it. Well, I don't really feel comfortable with children that are not my own, but we received this flyer in the mail about Emily's school needing volunteers to tutor children with learning disabilities. I might not be the most charitable soul in the world, but you'd be entirely misled if you thought my soul doesn't have just a little piece of heaven in it. Besides, I think, I need a distraction. I take that volunteering job and they assign me to be a reading tutor. Now, reading is something I am very comfortable with because, you see, I keep up with all of those magazines. It turns out children are very interested in Us Weekly and People. Before you know it, I will have these learning challenge students reading like little bookworms. At dinner, my husband tells me he thinks the volunteering is a good idea, but he doesn't want me overexerting myself, what with the job and the volunteer work. But I tell him that I am a fully independent woman, and furthermore that I am quite enjoying myself. And it's honestly true. The teachers act as if I am just the best gift they have ever received, and the children are very respectful. For example, no one has mentioned the rash near my face. I wish my husband cared more about this change in me. I'm like a whole new person, and yet I still do all the things that he has come to depend on from me. Ironing his shirts, making this household perfectly pleasant, going to the grocery store, tending to Emily. I'm around so many people these days. My career is going marvelously. My boss admires my dedication to filing, and I must say, I have a very pleasant phone voice. But all he can say is, "You should make that kumquat salad again sometime." I want to throw my bowl of hot curried carrot soup in his face. I want to scream, "Kumquats are a ludicrous fruit, and I know who you're fucking." But instead, I tell Emily to pass me a slice of bread, and I butter it very slowly, and I say, "Yes, why that's a marvelous idea, dear." My husband tells me all about Steve's promotion. Apparently, it came as a little bit of a surprise. The man is so comical looking and all, what with his ridiculously long nose hairs. "Oh yes," I say, sipping slowly at my Merlot. What a surprise. My husband has been on no business trips lately, and I have not left town for any shopping trips to Houston either, and I would like to believe that this has left very little window of opportunity for him and Jane. One night, I casually mentioned to my husband that I would love a new car. What kind of car, he wants to know. He is chewing his broccoli and beef casserole very seriously, mulling over this. I tell him that I need something to make me feel sexy. I feel like such a homely house mother driving around that old Suburban. Besides, I've had it for over 4 years now. I want a car like that for my 16th birthday, Emily says, though this occasion is over 6 years away. My husband looks very agitated by this. "Be quiet," he says. "Your mother and I are talking." I have tried to communicate to Emily the importance of not behaving this way around her father. One of these days, I'm going to have to take reign over that child before she does to this marriage what she did to my abdominal muscles. I have learned from experience, and let me tell you, even a little stretch, a little extra elasticity in the wrong place can be hard to recover from. My husband tells me that I'm not homely, and this gives me a feeling of security. That night, I tell him such interesting and funny stories from work. You should have just heard him laugh. It's a wonder to me that I can't think of the last time we made love. Did you know we used to take bed and breakfast weekend trips for that very purpose? It occurs to me that I could check his credit card statements, see if he has visited any hotels or places like that lately, but I don't want to know. My rash is just starting to get a little better. These days, I'm feeling more beautiful. My dermatologist has prescribed a new and very expensive cream and some laser treatments. This is all covered by Jeffrey's insurance, and it's already making quite the difference on my little condition. Virtually the only time my little itch flares up is when I see Jane at spin class, and the patches are a much lighter shade of red. Which reminds me of something I was going to mention. Today, in the locker room, Jane had a copy of Bride's magazine in her gym bag. I saw it while she was changing in a bathroom stall. Can you imagine the woman having the audacity to plan out her wedding to my husband? It makes me wonder what kinds of things he has promised her. I wanted to shove my 2-carat diamond straight into her eye socket and watch the blood ooze down her snarky little face. I want to scream, I am married to Jeffrey, and I have the bad posture pictures to prove it, you little kumquat. But she's been looking so sad and pathetic these days, what with Steve winning the big promotion and all. Maybe it's around this time that I start to love my husband again. Just little things about him, you know. He's so good with Emily, really. Just last weekend, he helped her earn her outdoors badge. Of course, Emily, like me, really is very partial to air conditioning, but she seemed to do okay on their little hike. So what if she made him carry her for most of the way? I know it's him that I should be mad at, but mostly I blame Jane. My husband isn't a highly complex person, and I doubt he would be the type to seek this kind of thing out. It must have been Jane's idea. I can just see her planning it all, running her tongue over her teeth in that irritating way, thinking about what Jeffrey's sleep number would be and how to tempt my husband into her bed. So this is one thing I do. I start planning a vacation for Jeffrey and I to visit Paris in the early summer when Emily will be at Girl Scout camp. Maybe that could be just the thing we need. Some time for just the two of us, alone in a foreign country and so very far from Jane. Emily's principal is awarding me as Volunteer of the Month at the next school assembly, I announced to my husband before our dessert of homemade cherry pie, his favorite. I tell my husband that I'm going to bed early without dessert. It's just that right now, darling, I'm absolutely fatigued from spin class, I tell him, and I need to watch my figure. Could I just be imagining that the man looks slightly disappointed, as if I had just announced that I made his cherry pie sugar-free? My boss at Virtual Financial Planning wants to have a meeting with me, and this causes me a great deal of stress, though my skin doesn't break out into hives like usual. It seems these laser treatments are more than adequate. It figures for the rate of $300 a session. Perhaps, I think, on my way to the meeting, it isn't okay for me to be reading magazines at my desk when I have done all my duties. To tell you the truth, it never occurred to me to ask about that. Well, I am in for quite a surprise. My boss starts talking about how much he admires the work I've been doing for the company. Everyone remarks on my cheerful disposition and my attention to detail. He wants to know if I would be able to work 20 hours a week as an office manager. I tell him I've never been the manager of anything, and could you have ever guessed? He's going to order business cards with my name on them. I will even be getting my own company email address soon. My husband takes me out to a fancy dinner to celebrate the big promotion, and though I had to suggest the idea, I make a mental note to tell Mary Ann all about it in front of Jane later that week. I asked Bernice if she would be able to come twice a week from now on, and I assigned to her the task of laundry, but I tell her not to worry about ironing my husband's shirts. You see, the truth is, it gives me a special kind of pleasure, doing something just the way he prefers, doing something for him better than any other woman can. And if you are in the business of doubting my excellent ability at this task, then you have not seen what a woman from Georgia can do with starch. Our 13-year anniversary is coming up, and I keep reminding my husband of this fact so he will not forget it. At spin class, I mentioned this to Mary Ann in front of Jane. Jane's thighs are looking a bit lumpy this week. I give her my sweetest smile and ask, "How are you enjoying those cookies, Jane?" I feel better about myself. Jane isn't that much younger than me. It's true, I'm a little on one side of my mid-30s, and it's not the side that I'd like to be on. But Jane is no spring sapling either. She is at least 30. That night at dinner, while my husband is enjoying Paula Deen's baked macaroni and I'm eating a lean cuisine, I tell him we've drifted apart a bit over the years. I tell him that I admire his dedication to fatherhood, to Emily and I, and the excellent job he's doing with the company. I'm always giving him compliments like that now. I tell him that I want to feel closer to him again, and that I feel our relationship needs to be renewed with a sense of vigor. I've learned so many new words from my work at the office. My husband notices that my skin is looking better. He puts his hand on my knee and makes eye contact with me. This is the most intimate he has been with me in months, so it's hard to feel disappointed when he tells me he has a lot of paperwork to catch up on. But it's hard to feel happy about another night of falling asleep in our absurd king-size sleep number bed alone. My boss is a man who is older than my husband. He has sophisticated graying hair, and I know that he has a special kind of affection for me. Until recently, though, I never thought his attention was a sign of any kind of interest in me. But there is a way that he has started putting a hand on my shoulder when he speaks to me, his offering me coffee, even though it is my job to bring coffee to him, and how he has stood behind me at the copier to give instructions, just a little too close. I know that I could do something if I wanted to, but I keep a disposition that says, I am a wife, I am a mother. These things are enough for me. It gives me satisfaction to think that I could do something, but that I choose not to. There is a sense of dignity, I tell myself, in having kept a vow. In a way, it makes me feel stronger to be the one who has kept my allegiance. Our anniversary falls on a Thursday, and I have to work and volunteer at the school, then take Emily to dance practice and meet with our travel agent before picking her up. It occurs to me that morning I should buy myself a gift, a little present for dealing with all of this so gracefully. I know it sounds quite spontaneous, but that's exactly what I do. I buy myself a little red sports car. Before I return home at 6 o'clock, I call Jeffrey and tell him to wait for us in the driveway. I want him to see me pull up like this, my red hair blowing back in the wind, the look on my face saying, I am in control and I bought this car, my body language saying, I don't need you, I want you, but I don't have to have you. The years have been kind to him. I think this when I pull up and see him standing there, leaning against our stone mailbox. His posture is quite nice now. Funny, I never realized it before. I jump out of my little red sports car and throw my arms around Jeffrey. I tell him that I've named the car Insanity, that I just needed something fun for myself, and he seems to understand this. In that moment, he seems to realize that I have needs and that I can fulfill them on my own, that I exist separately from making him fancy dinners and ironing his shirts. He kisses me and it feels very real, the way he tells me he likes the car, the way he tells me to put on something nice. He has hired a teenager from the neighborhood to babysit Emily for the evening, and when she complains, I tell her to be quiet, to do as her father says, and Jeffrey looks at me with what I can only describe as admiration, a look I haven't seen in a long time. We go out to dinner and then drive around the city, just the two of us in my new little red car. His hand is on top of mine, and I feel closer to him than ever. It's true, this car makes me feel sexy in a way I've never felt before. At Wink, I catch myself in the reflection of the restaurant's glass. I look at this woman in a new black dress with red hair, this woman with a company email and a red sports car, this woman who has things to do, and suddenly I feel as if I own all this, and it doesn't matter if I became these things for Jeffrey, because I will be this way now, for myself. I don't feel threatened by any of it anymore. I will outlast her because I am someone now. It is me he will choose because I have become myself again. And in a way, I suppose I am thankful to her. She has made me just as much as I have, and now I'm always a part of her, a secret that is all my own. That night, we set both sides of our sleep number bed to 70, and I give my husband my anniversary gift to him. I bought some new black lingerie that highlights my strongest features, my newly creamy skin, my breasts that have enjoyed a lift, my strong shoulders, my spin class sculpted thighs. Jeffrey is all over me in a second, like he devours one of my homemade lemon meringue pies in the summer. And though it doesn't last long, I haven't seen him happier in months. And when he is just at his threshold, I hear him mumble a name under his breath. Perhaps it is my own, but then maybe he says, "Oh, Jane, Jane." Yes, I say, I am. Oh, yes, yes, I am. Thank you.